I wanted to share some of my thoughts and experiences using ChatGPT for CASAS competencies and standards. Could be CASAS content standards, could be ELP, CCR, or whatever other standards that you're using. So I'm going to start with kind of taking a lesson or an activity that you already have, whether it's from a textbook or something that you've created, and then trying to understand what CASAS competencies or other standards that would address, and then also working the other way, starting with those competencies or standards, and then trying to decide what activities could work with that, or what it would develop or address. I'm going to also talk about the limitations of using ChatGPT for this, but I'm also, of course, going to show you a workaround for that or a solution. And then I wanted to go into long-term planning using ChatGPT for standards and competencies, but I don't know if that's really that applicable here. I might just preview it a little bit. And then finally, I'm going to show you not an actual lesson plan, but how you can take something that you want to do that's maybe not in the textbook and then kind of use ChatGPT again. And not only ChatGPT, but actually using the reference materials. But how you can kind of show to yourself and to others that it is hitting all of these important standards and competencies. So let's just start with ChatGPT and CASAS competencies. So I'm actually going to go to CASAS website first. So primarily I use the CASAS competencies just because it's part of my job. I don't want to say requirement, but it's a big part of what we're doing in terms of measuring students' progress and what are the students actually doing in class and making sure that they align with those competencies. So I'm going to click here, and you'll see that you're actually going to get a file here. This is from the official CASAS website. Now, actually, this is a little bit old, but I guess it's still relevant because it hasn't been updated. So the one problem I'll say right off the bat with using ChatGPT for this is that it sometimes gives you the wrong code, or the descriptors are weird. They're not necessarily wrong, but they're like out of order or they're worded differently. But the workaround that I've found is by making sure that you constantly remind ChatGPT to reference this document. That seems to solve the problem for the most part. And of course, you should just be familiar with this document anyway, because as anyone who's used ChatGPT or AI in general, or have students who've used it, you'll see that often it is wrong or extremely generic, lacking detail, right? And to really understand what you're looking at, you need that background information. So you should already be familiar with the CASAS competencies. All ChatGPT is doing is just making things quicker or helping you, gives you ideas that you hadn't thought of before. But you still need to check it, you need to refine it, you need to revise it, and again, you need to know what you're actually reading. When students submit assignments, just copying and pasting from ChatGPT, it's pretty obvious. You ask them to explain anything in that document, and then often they'll say, I don't know. And so that's what we're trying to avoid doing. So let's get right to it. I taught a class last summer. Uh, for summer classes at one of my schools, we can basically teach anything. So it doesn't have to be tied to a textbook, or it doesn't have to be like a multi-skills class. So I taught a class which used movies to help students with conversation. So let's look at, okay, so let's say for a lesson using Back to the Future with the scene of Marty coming home and seeing his father and Biff arguing about the crashed car, what CASAS competencies and content standards, well, let's just start with the competencies, might this address? Okay, and please use this document for reference. Okay, and that's key here. So I'm going to upload the PDF competencies. Okay. Okay, so I did use Back to the Future that year. And I also used Groundhog Day, but we'll just focus on one particular scene. I'm not going to give like a whole course overview or anything with curriculum or anything like that. Of course, you can apply these skills and knowledge to long term planning, whether that's a course, a curriculum, and so on. Excuse me. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, let's just make sure these match up. So 4.6.1, following, clarifying, or providing feedback to instructions. Okay, let's just make sure that's, what was that 4.6.1? Okay. 4.6.1. Yes, very good. Okay, so it looks like that is a match. Okay. Let's check one more. 1.9.7, identifying procedures and reporting information regarding automobile accidents. Interesting. 1.9.7. Great. So that is here in the CASAS competencies. Okay. So, of course, this is too many topics. So, what I focused on last summer for this particular scene, I'm not going to show a clip from the movie. You can look that up yourself. Hopefully, you've actually seen the movie before. But it's clear that a big part of that scene is bullying, which is setting up the relationship between Biff and George McFly for when Marty actually goes back in time, and that's of course a big part of the story in general. So let's focus on the bullying aspect, which is what I did last summer. So let's focus on the bullying in that scene. Again, please list CASAS competencies addressed using this document for reference. Okay, so let's make sure that's clear. One thing I've noticed about using ChatGPT is even though it creates kind of a running thread or a conversation, you have to remind it often. For example, if I don't ask it to reference that document, it'll give me weird results for the CASAS competencies. Okay, so see, this is what I found last time when I did a kind of a trial run. Is this was interesting. I hadn't even thought about this one. So 5.3.1, interpreting common laws and ordinances, recognizing abusive behavior in a legal or ethical context. Interesting. 5.3.1. Okay, so let's make sure that's correct. Excellent. Okay, in individuals' legal rights and responsibilities. Wow. So that's something I wish I had thought of last summer. I did focus on the bullying aspect, but mostly just from a kind of a generic, as a generic topic, playground bullying, bullying in schools, but I didn't really think about it as bullying in the workplace. And if you wanted to go even further, you can get into the legal aspects of that, not just the interpersonal, but of course there are legal consequences for bullying. You have your rights, especially if you have a union, HR, and so there's a lot of different possibilities. So I'm not just getting, the CASAS competencies and content standards. I'm also just getting teaching ideas in general, ideas for the lessons, which is great. Don't think of ChatGPT or AI as cheating. Think about it as a way of just, getting ideas, a sounding board. It's giving you links to things, referring you to different things. You might bounce ideas off of your colleague. Well, you're bouncing ideas off ChatGPT, and ultimately, you still need to have that background knowledge. You're still the one making these connections and coming up with a lot of ideas. So it's definitely not cheating. I will say that sometimes it does save time in terms of your planning and lesson material creation and so on, finding resources. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily save you time, but it helps you make better lessons or better materials. So you can think about it in that way as well. Okay, so let's do one more. Personal management 7.5.2, identifying or using strategies to develop a positive self-image. 7.5.2. Wow. Okay. See, didn't even think about that. So not just the bullying side of it, but also maybe why George allows himself to be bullied, right? Because in a sense, he is allowing this behavior by not standing up for himself. And then, of course, if you've seen the movie, you'll see that this is something that George works on. And at the end of the movie, the roles are reversed, right? In a way, between Biff and George. Okay. So those are the competencies, which are, you can call them kind of these general life skills, right? Now let's get into content standards such as reading, writing, speaking, listening, and grammar. I think I want to let's focus on listening first. Okay. So, um, what CASAS listening standards might this lesson address? Please use this document for reference. Reference. Okay. Then now I'm going to use the listening content standards from that CASAS website. Actually, let me show you here. So CASAS competencies and then CASAS content standards. So let's open up that. And then you have reading, math, listening, writing, and speaking. I thought there was a grammar one, but that might be embedded with like the reading and the writing. So what I did was I just downloaded the listening standards and it pulls them up here. And I guess I'll be referring to that in just a moment anyway. So let's see what ChatGPT gives me. Interesting. Okay. Let's look at 4. Comprehend, simple, learn social exchanges, recognizing the power dynamics and the dialogue between Biff and George. Okay, 4.1. Let's see if that's true. Comprehend, learn, simple, learn social exchanges. Okay, so you kind of have to kind of elaborate on that a little bit, embellish, I guess. This is something I thought was interesting when I tried this yesterday. Use non-language based clues to guess meaning, 6.4. Okay. Okay, that looks good. Detect a speaker's direct or indirect purpose or bias, such as Biff's manipulation and blame shifting. Interesting. Let's see. 6.12. I like it. Persuasive arguments. Okay, persuasive could kind of be part of bullying as well. Manipulation is part of persuasion, I suppose. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that you can do here. Let's see here. Okay, I got some, and the thing too is I noticed when I did this yesterday, I got some slightly different results, which were not wrong, but gave me some other ideas. So ChatGPT is not always consistent as well. But hey, we're not building something perfect, right? So it's okay if it's not 100% correct or it's not always consistent. We're just making a lesson, right? And of course, even during the lesson, we'll be changing things probably depending on how the students are doing or engaging with the materials. So don't get too hung up on these inconsistencies. Again, that's why you need the background information to be able to catch things, and you just constantly refining and asking more questions and trying to be more specific each time. You're not going to get a perfect result the first time. So, but I think this is good enough. Maybe let's do writing. Okay, because writing is, well, actually, it was not a writing was not a big part of that course. So let's try speaking. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure I download this first. Whoop, job search 2024. What's going on there? Okay, so what CASAS speaking standards might this lesson address? Please use this document for reference. Okay. So now I'm going to do the speaking. Let's see what it spits out. So this is a big thing that students need to do is convey the emotional content of a spoken message. So Biff's anger or George's fear or frustration. So ESL students often have trouble basically expressing emotion in their second language, which is English, which is understandable. So 6.10, let's just make sure that's correct. Yep, looks good. Okay, so I don't have to keep checking these then. Yeah, I like this one too. Respond with suggestions, feedback, or alternative viewpoints, respectively and politely. So what we see with Biff and George is that, of course, Biff is doing the opposite of this, right? He's extremely rude. He's a very toxic boss. He's manipulating George. So students can see that and then also learn how to basically do the opposite of that, right? Being respectful and polite, even when they are being critical of someone. So great stuff here. I'm going to stop here. There could be reading, writing, and grammar as well, but we won't get into that. But you understand the basic idea, right? Now, if we want to get into, now that's kind of a lesson, right? But what if we get into specific activities? Okay, so let's go back to CASAS competencies. Okay, so if students are reading the script out loud with classmates, what CASAS content standards might that address? So now I'm looking at specific activities, not just the lesson as a whole. Okay, so again, we're getting some ideas here. 1.8, use pronunciation and stress patterns to convey moods, emotions, and attitudes. And I don't know if that's exactly the correct one. Well, I guess I can just check. 1.8, speaking 1.8. Okay. Yeah, close enough, right? I didn't ask it to refer to the document, but you get the idea. Okay, learn social exchanges. Okay, paraphrase information. So we can do paraphrase. After they read the script out loud, how would they summarize it, or how would they reword the dialogue? How would they report the dialogue? So it's spoken dialogue, but then how do you report it? Um, things like that. So again, it's not just giving you the CASAS competencies and content standards, listening, writing, speaking, whatever. It's also just kind of giving you ideas for the lesson itself, for activities. All right, let's do one more. Let's see. So, what activities? Actually, please give me. You don't have to say please. 3 examples of activities for this dialogue that would address 6.1. Okay, so paraphrasing information for clarification. Okay, so now I'm asking for an actual suggestion for a lesson activity based on this speaking standard 6.1. Okay, I'm not going to go into detail here, but you can see that it's giving me a lot of great ideas. I'm the teacher, I'm the one who's going to be managing or monitoring the students, helping them as they're doing it. All this is doing is giving me great ideas and then also kind of freeing up my time and energy to focus on the actual teaching and interacting with students. I feel like that's pretty much it. Um, let me show you one more thing. So this is something I'm not even sure if you've noticed this, but CASA standards and those competencies and all those different things, they should already be in your textbook if you are using a textbook. So let's say here, lesson planner. Okay, so this is the textbook that we're using at one of my sites or one of my jobs is the Standout series, and this is the online version. Now they call it a lesson planner. Honestly, it's just notes in a PDF form. So it's pretty clunky. I don't know if I'd call it a lesson planner. But usually in the student version, they do have a list of all of those standards, and there could be multiple ones. I believe in this one, they're just focusing on the competencies here. Yeah, CASAS competencies chart. Okay. And then if you go to the individual lessons, it'll give you more detail. So let's just go to here. So writing an email to your friend. Okay. And so now it has CASAS competencies, but it also has CCR, college career readiness standards, and then ELP, and then, and so on. So more details, right? So again, you're kind of doing the same thing. The reason I like using ChatGPT, but you don't even have to use ChatGPT. What I used to do is actually I had printed copies of these content standards and competencies, and I would just look at them anytime I was creating my own lesson. Now, whether I was creating a lesson from scratch or adapting a resource or kind of extending a textbook lesson to make it more relatable or practical or applicable, I would always kind of refer to these, not just for myself, but also to show the students that anytime we're doing a non-textbook activity, there is a very specific reason for that. They are still developing the same skills, and probably in a more realistic way and more engaging way than they would with the textbook. Textbooks are always great; it's a good place to start. But by design or by their nature, they're going to be more generic, right? Because they're looking at a national or international audience. They don't want to get into religion. They don't want to get into politics. They cannot get into local matters. They don't want to get into, they're always out of date, basically, because technology is always changing. There's always new things happening in the world. Currency is changing, right? Bitcoin, crypto, all that stuff. So you can't just have a textbook, of course, right? And I think any teacher with experience will know that. The question is, when you start creating your own lessons or adapting materials from online, like a CNN news article, or even just singing a song in class, right? Having the students learn a song. And you say, okay, well, what is the purpose of this, right? If we want to tie it into the curriculum, if we want to justify our inclusion of these things, right? Not just for ourselves, but also to show our students, to be transparent, and hopefully to get some buy-in from them when they see that they are really still learning a lot and they are still developing the same skills, but again in a more engaging or realistic way. But also from the people in charge of your department who may walk in and ask, well, why are you singing this song? Well, let me show you. And then you show them all the different standards and competencies that are being developed and improved through a song, right? Or you have a formal lesson observation, right? So you want to be able to list these things for those non-textbook activities or lessons. And honestly, sometimes, unfortunately, people will scrutinize your lessons and your teaching, and they'll say, well, this is not in the book, or this is not exactly part of our curriculum. Well, again, the whole idea of these standards and competencies is they're not tied to a textbook. A textbook is only trying to develop those skills or standards or proficiency or whatever, right? The textbook itself should not matter, right? You can learn those skills any which way. You don't even need a textbook to learn any of those skills, right? And so I think this is, I don't want to call it insurance. That I don't know, feels a little cynical maybe. But being able to not just identify these standards, but also to use ChatGPT to quickly spit them out or to give you ideas, why I think that's amazing. Okay, so I think that's about it. There was one more thing, so maybe I can try it here. Let's see here. Okay. Actually, yeah, it's not really quite a CASAS competency or content standards, but let's just try one more. So please do the same for ELP standards and CCR standards. Okay, so just to give you an idea that you can use it for other standards as well. Now, again, you would want to double check these. I don't really use these, so I'm not even going to bother. But if these are standards that you use, of course, as I mentioned, you want to either upload the PDF and ask ChatGPT to refer to it specifically, or you can include the web link or the web page link or whatever. Just make sure you double check it, okay? All right, I think that's about it.